honestly, I
The
would call it
Azov
the debate.
battalion.
You people are literally obsessed with the debate stuff. I'm like, would like to call it a conversation where I express my, let's put it like that, concerns with some things you said. And I
Okay.
would like you and your audience to hear my concerns and to think about it a bit. That's what I want.
Sure.
So,
Hit me up.
yeah, that's about it. What happened is basically I heard your comments about Azov.
Oh. Might as well change the title. The mystery is that Vaush is debating Anastazja, and there was supposed to be like a secret, but the secret's out, so I am changing the title. The secret's out, the cat's out of the bag. There we go. Lucy's blind reaction to a Vaush debate with Anastazja. There we go, we're changing the title. Not to make people confused anymore.
Azov. And in the video,
okay.
And also people send me your tweets about them, which I should have pulled up probably, but I will quote, like, not directly, but you know, your words that you said. And I, when I heard it, it was, I think, in maybe April. I'm not sure. My life is a bit, you know, weird. I don't remember dates when I heard people saying stuff.
That's
but
reasonable.
You were covering basically what was going on, and I was watching your video. This is how I stumbled basically upon you and realized you're the last good lefty on YouTube. Basically.
The last SJW, just like Steven wanted himself to be.
But the last hope of the Western leftists. But other than that, this phrase, I will admit, did hurt quite a bit.
Okay.
Especially because I respect you a lot, and you're not like a tanky, you know, dude that calls me a Nazi whore and everything with Ukraine is Nazi. So these people I don't care about. I don't want to talk about them. Fuck them. But you saying what you said is it was a bit rough. And what you said was basically that Azov guys should pretty much put guns in their mouths and like kill themselves, and you will be like happy about it, basically. Not a direct quote, but the gist of it, you know. Also, as people showed me your tweets when you said like, be careful guys to post locations of Ukrainian troops, not to like dox their location to the enemy unless they're Azov. This one. And the comments that people wrote to that were even worse than what you said. But I will not hold you accountable for the, you know, stuff that people in the comments says. I will like talk to you about what you said. So this, I will probably share a story first. I know facts and stuff are important, but here's a little bit of a story. So you wished pretty much to the entirety of Azov battalion to, you know, die. And you said you would be happy if they die. And people in your comments said a lot of stuff like, yeah, put them to the meat grinder, you know, stuff like that. And me and quite a lot of Ukrainians were highly offended by that shit. And I will try to explain why in the best way I can. So, to answer me this, for starters, are you of the opinion that literally most people or like every person in Azov is a Nazi? Is this your opinion?
No, not every. I mean, nobody has exact numbers. It's the Azov battalion was like a regional defense group that emerged kind of their own volition during a period of time where Ukraine had essentially no military capabilities, and they ended up getting involved in the fighting in the Donbass pretty quickly against the Russian proxy invasion. And a lot of the Azov group people were like band-the-right ultra nationalists. There were a lot of far-right people there, but because it was also like a regional defense thing, a lot of people get pulled in on that. I don't know the exact numbers on this, and every time you check, somebody has like a different like estimation of like, okay, well, there were 1,000 Azov people and 500 are Nazis, or actually 10,000 Azov, but only 1,000 are Nazis. You know, I don't know the exact bits. I know that they definitely have a pretty strong like average ideological disposition, though.
Correct on everything. I would
All
just
right.
add a little bit, details, I guess. So basically, what happened is, as you probably know,
So far so good. Like, I don't think I have like much to add. Like, of course, we've already discussed how certain things came to be during World War II and even before World War II. Like, there's a lot.
Maidan Revolution happened, and after that, we had no government, functional government. There was no like election, nothing yet done. So it was a clusterfuck, basically. After the huge revolution, we had like no government. With our president escaped, obviously, to Russia, former president Yanukovych, and it was a pretty dire time. And in this exact time, of course, Russia decided to invade, which is obviously like the most like hard time in the history.
And yet, this was a terrifying time, obviously, for anyone that lives in the proximity of the events, right?
History of modern Ukraine, they, attacked. And they annexed Crimea, as you know, and then they invaded further. So Donbass,
Right, high enough.
the drill. And we at the time, had huge problem with like traders, with pro-Russian people in very strong positions of power, like judges, institutions, army personnel, stuff like that. They were like infiltrated pretty much everything. Because before Maidan, they controlled pretty much everything. Like not always directly, but many Russian citizens were even, in control of pretty important institutions in Ukraine. So this was a clusterfuck, and we couldn't like literally trust anyone, and we had no functional army, but we had an invasion on our hands. So in the plans were not only Donbass, but also Kharkiv, where I'm from, also Odessa, and
Odessa,
other places. So basically, the people who ended up being the only defenders of this country were those volunteer battalions. Not only Azov, many other as well, like Aidar, many other. And they were...
Poland has a history of its own voluntary battalions, but the Polish voluntary battalions were much more problematic than the Ukrainian ones.
As you said, primarily far-right people. Some of them were very us people, suspicious guys. So, like ultras, so like football fans. They were like maybe like some kind of like gym culture, alpha male dudes as well.
I think football fans, it's putting it a bit lightly. I think saying they are football fans is underplaying it a little bit.
No, there were a lot of people there.
A little bit of underplaying.
The main person who created Azov, Beletsky, was a literal Nazi. So there's like no way around that shit. So he was like basically Jews everywhere, like they control the banking, crypto Jews, the dance. Yeah, so basically all of that shit. White race, which was a cringe and a half in Ukraine because nobody literally talks about race here. We're like very homogenous, there's... Yet obviously there are people here who are not white, but the majority of people are white. And it's not like a big conversation. People talk about ethnicity, people talk about nationality for sure, but race, it was like a topic that...
Many people conflate ethnicity and race, let's be honest here. Many people conflate those concepts enough that talk about ethnicity can become very racist. Like, Poland is not that far away from Ukraine, and trust me when I say racism is definitely a thing, and talk of race is much more present than it might be. The racial relations are not the same as in the US, but it's not really true that in those regions race is not at all spoken about, okay? That's not really true either. The percentage of neo-Nazis in Azov has been changed through the years, and that is also an important factor here, right? except with Roma people. That is enough of racist stuff. Yeah, like the Roma people, racism is, yeah, she is definitely underplaying it here. Like when Anastazja says that people do not talk about race in places like Ukraine and Poland and all the other Eastern European countries, I think she means that the race relations are not the same in here as in the US, but that is not the same as racism or race not being discussed here at all, because those things definitely are discussed, okay? Racism is definitely a thing.
People like didn't even like pick up, and basically he was that. So yeah, so he is the one who created Azov, which is
So this is a bit underplaying it, yeah. True.
And he was a Nazi, but then he kind of fell in love with Israel, which I don't know what the fuck is that about. He kind of realized that his perfect ethno state all along was the Jewish one. And he then started to use this, by the way, to explain he's not anti-Semitic, because he's like, well, I love Israel. And I was like, what? It's like, again, Beletsky. Basically, he created Azov, and he's a Nazi, yeah.
Right.
But afterwards, then many people who were also in that.
We are just less aware of this generally in the region. Well, it becomes also a bit more complicated because far-right countries like Poland parrot far-right talking points of the US. So when George Floyd was murdered, Polish bigots started parroting all the arguments of the bigots from the US. It's a bit complicated. It becomes a bit more complex as well, racial relations, right?
Battalion, like Yemichev, for example, who is from Kharkiv, by the way. Like most of them are, by the way, they are from Kharkiv or Donbass. They are not Westerners, as many Russians tell.
Also, I don't know about Ukraine in this regard, but Poland, for example, has a pretty big Vietnamese community in it, and that also, like, by definition, will create some sort of like discussion about race, right?
Your Bandera, Western people. Bandera. They are actually Russian-speaking Easterners, primarily. Kharkiv, Donbass. So, as you can imagine, they would be the ones to want to defend their Donbass, where they're from, obviously, right? So it's not only they are like very aggressive people, but they also it's their home that is invaded.
So in other words, there's like this element of ultra-nationalism. Let's not mince words. There's an element of ultra-nationalism involved in this thing, like ultra-patriotism, right?
East, pretty much, right? So most of them then they had some quarrels basically amongst each other. Some were trying to ditch Beletsky because of his idiotic anti-Semitic rhetoric and that people did not support. It's really hard to sell Nazism in Ukraine. Really hard, because people like basically like hell bent on hating it because it done so much damage, So
it's a bit more complicated than that. It is a bit more complicated than that to say that Nazism is extremely hard to sell in Ukraine, since we have the history of the World War II. But I'm also willing to, like, this is the part that needs the deeper dive, right? Because as I've explained before, Ukrainian people wanted to ally with Third Reich, but the Third Reich started murdering Ukrainian people indiscriminately. So there was this backfire that happened during the World War II period, right? And maybe she will talk about it. So yeah, racism is something present but less consciously. Yeah, right. So maybe she'll talk about it here.
For example, in America, you didn't have like a Nazi annihilating you, right? So, but in Ukraine, so many people died, like millions of people died, and Soviet Union, of course, years of Soviet Union were primarily concentrated on hating like Nazism and on saying how great we are because we defeated Nazism, right? So it's pretty hard to sell Nazism in Ukraine in that term. But
Yeah,
he didn't
guess.
manage to do that. He was very interested in politics, not in fighting. He created his own national corps. Not corpse, whatever. Not that.
But of course, it's more complicated than that because, technically speaking, a lot of the most horrible things from the Nazi regime happened in Poland, and yet Polish government is pretty fascistic right now. So it's difficult to sell Poland on outright Nazism. The Polish government still feels pretty comfortable enough to move towards fascism, right? So even this sort of thing becomes a bit more complicated than than you might think at first, right? It might not be as obvious as you might assume, that just because of this history, this could never happen, or this sort of ideology could never find any ground, right?
The dead bodies. National something, corpse, I think, but I can pronounce the word correctly for make it not
Does
sound
that,
like dead bodies.
It's core
So
in
basically,
English.
does that make sense? Yeah, does that make sense? What I'm saying right now? Do you understand what I am trying to say?
oh, maybe, yeah.
You ignore the
Thank
P and the S
So-
and just call it core.
Yeah, so basically that's what he created. It was deeply unpopular among people, among even far-right people in Ukraine. Nobody like vibed with that shit. Basically, he didn't get any seat. He get one seat in our Verkhovna Rada, which is like parliament in Ukraine. He got one seat first time and 0 seats the next elections. So not very lucky in terms, getting power. So other than that, what I was saying is that people started to defend their country.
But I do think that it's a bit strange that the anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia people try to frame the whole country as Nazi, as like a Nazi state based on a battalion, right?
And fight to prevent Russia from going any further. So pretty much the only reason why my Kharkiv and me as a person were not occupied by Russia in 2014 is them. So despite everything, I will be forever grateful for that, for obvious reason, because I don't want to be killed, raped, and imprisoned. So yeah, and I want to be a Ukrainian, as many other people want to be, So then afterwards, they were kind of like integrated in the army as a whole. So not like as volunteer entities, like separate battalions, right? But integrated in Ukrainian armed forces, which was a good
So it becomes like a discussion of
thing, because literally they started to blend in with everyone else and get de-radicalized. They separated themselves from Beletsky and his political party entirely, almost entirely, and they started to get way more new members, just people who wanted to protect their home. And the only people who were fighting back in the day were these battalions.
so basically, again, there's this element of patriotism and nationalism.
you wanted to protect your country, that's where you had to go. You didn't have like, a regular army, which is weird for Americans to understand, I think. But we had like 0 army. And these guys were the ones who started to get more people there, like from various...
Yeah, they are understandable. They are understandable, yeah.
Cities, so like Jewish people, Greeks, Azerbaijani people, all sorts of people started to integrate and to become part of this, force in Azov as well. And of course, this helped with, dilute this nationalist, very far right vibe they were having. And yeah, so this is basically what happened. And at this time, pretty much Nemechev denounced, he's like the actual leader of Azov right now. He denounces like what Beletsky did. He also denounced his far right and anti-Semitic stuff. And he said that they have like a 30% of very, very far right people in Azov right now, which is his estimation. There's very much, like you said, you cannot check that shit, honestly. So how would you like, say?
Yeah, Svoboda is like another. And she's saying something important here too. The success of the Azov meant that there was an extinction of members that might have been less ideology Nazis, but more to join the ranks to defend against Russians. But that can also be a trap, right? Like that becomes like a very difficult topic in many ways, because if you have like an ideologically very far right organization, very like if you have an organization that is very far right and you have people that join the ranks just to defend Ukraine, there is still a chance to those regular members to be indoctrinated within the organization. So it becomes like a, if you know what I mean, right? So as much like I can understand Anastasia's feelings about her hometown being saved, but I also feel that it's a bit more complicated, right? Like Ukraine has been historically in a really difficult spot, which is why these topics become not as simple to discuss as one might initially think, It becomes actually quite difficult.
Yeah, 30%, yeah. But that's what he says. And also we can...
But it can also deal with the correct ideology. My argument, you have to track the actual happening on the ground. Right, yeah. Well, she does have a conflict of interest. That is undeniable that she has a conflict of interest, right? There is a clear conflict here. So that not trusting her fully as a source is also understandable, in my opinion. But it is worth understanding that this topic is quite complicated, right?
Jump in his head to see, are you a Nazi? But at least his rhetoric has nothing to do with that. And not a single like manifesto of theirs has anything to do with anti-Semitism or any racial shit at all. Mostly they talk about anti-imperialism, so fight against Russia, and they are very NATO skeptic and very Eurosceptic. So they don't want to be part of European Union and part of NATO. They want like independent Ukraine, and they hate like communism, Soviet Union shit, and Russia. That's like...
So basically they are far-righters. If the Polish government is also very Eurosceptic. So this description is basically building in my mind a very reliable and like image what sort of people you have like you're dealing with, right? Pretty bad people, I would say. The whole Euroscepticism, the whole rabid nationalism, I would say those are pretty bad things, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like
the main gist. And again, not to say that there are no Nazis there, for sure. But, the majority of them right now are not Nazis. So, here's my problem.
Like this description, makes me create not a very good image, okay? It should be noted that Azov also wanted to help train far-right activists of foreign soil. Right, yeah, right? It's just this short description that Anastazja has given does not create a very good image in my mind, right? In some part of the necessity as Western support was more aware of the danger of Azov, right?
Problem. Why did you think it's...
I watched the debate live. She always seems to fall back on her personal experience and connections to the Ukrainian armed forces, but her justifying the black sign in the logo was a little weird. Oh, hello, Timero. I don't think I've seen you in here before. I hope you enjoy your time in the stream, and I hope maybe you'll become a giggler. So yeah, I think her description of the traits of members does track a lot with the far right of Poland, and that makes me really... That does not fill me with confidence, right? I had a British fascist in the server. I volunteered that server, and he was approached to be a recruiter. Right? Yeah. Like,
it's okay to wish those people dead?
Oh, sure. Well, I don't and can't really care if Nazis die, because the political consequences...
One concern of Azov from country extremists was not that they will be successful in Ukraine, but rather what role they play on wider far-right ecosystem. Yeah, exactly, Karaso. Like, I'm not gonna lie, maybe that's extremist of me, but I think that it would do Ukraine a lot of good if there was a pretty swift denazification effort, right? If all the Nazis, all the Azov types would be sort of quote-unquote purged from the army. Like, I think so. I was watching silently for some time and discovered it through Vaush's stream. I always enjoy hearing Polish leftist pozdrawiam. Oh, hello, Timero. Hello, hello. So yeah, I think there should be a really strong denazification effort, especially since sadly there's a big rise of fascism when it comes to this region in Poland, Polish government. Hungary is like basically a dictatorship, and it would and any even small Nazi influence in Ukraine should be basically excised, especially from the army. The real war in eastern Ukraine meant Western neo-Nazis could have the real life role training. Yeah, exactly, because they could recruit. That is also the problem, right? I agree. I definitely agree with this. Like, people need to realize that fascism, Nazism, far right is a very international project, right? This is like a very big element of it.
Of them living are generally far worse than, them not making it along the way. The main concern that I have, and this has been lightened somewhat recently, because Ukraine actually has a pretty resilient liberal democracy, which means...
Yeah, which is pretty good, but you never know, right? Like, but there is a counterpoint why Azov acceptance to regular army was so important at 2014. Yeah, but here's the thing, right? I'm actually I have to be careful here, okay? I want to be careful about what I'm about to say, okay? It is good that Ukraine is in the middle of, imagine that as of taking governance too, right? Not just being part of the regular army. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I will state what I'm about to state very carefully, but there is a worry in my mind. It is good in a way that Ukraine is in the middle of a certain patriotic fervor right now, and that it helps in fighting against the Russian invader. But part of me is worried about what will happen after the war ends, when the nationalistic high will run very powerfully. I am a bit worried about a very strong sense of nationalism forming, and I'm worried about, paradoxically, about the strong ties that Poland has with Ukraine, because the current Ukrainian government is very far right, and I'm worried about creating strong ties between Ukraine and the Polish government, and I'm worried that the strongly nationalistic and strongly like on this national high Ukraine might just go in a pretty far right direction itself, you know? Does that make sense in any way, shape, or form? My worry. Does that make sense at all, what I'm saying? Does anybody share my worry in that regard? At 2014, one faced the issue that tends the prior paramilitary groups would have also be local warlords. Yeah, that's true. I'm not talking about parties now, but yes, I share your feelings. I am especially talking about the idea that Azov might be having more local power would have been a more scarier situation than integrating them in the regular army. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was basically a way to declaw them, like, right? To try to make them less harmful than they could. But yeah, but I do have my worries about the rise of big nationalism that is helpful during wartime, like right now, during the aggression of Russia, but might turn out to be more complicated during peacetime, if that makes sense. That doesn't make sense? Especially since Poland and Ukraine are very close, and I know what sort of government Poland has, and well, it can become complicated later down the road, you know? It can become a problem. You know, it would be really sad if Ukraine ended up just becoming another far-right country in the region. I'll say that much. Yeah, in this way, Ukrainian state did have more control over Azov. So yeah, I am worried about this aspect. Yeah, there's also going to be nationalism when people defend their country territory. The issue is what comes after. I remember correctly, the ultra-nationalism took over Poland after the Soviet war. Yeah, right? So this like, it's good to think about what's happening now, but I also think that it's pretty good to worry about the future, if that makes sense. Of course, we're still thinking about a pretty good scenario, because this is assuming that in the end, Russia will be repealed, right? Like, the worst possible scenario is Russia somehow winning and maybe even going further and then invading Poland next, or Lithuania next, or something, and things escalating further. That would be like a really bad, although that's pretty unlikely right now, but we do have to think about these things, right? We had a lot of fear that far-right Ukrainians attack Hungarian speakers in the West Ukraine. Ironically, the attack that happened was from far-right Polish groups in Ukraine against Hungarian minority. Right, because yeah, see, like, this is exactly what I'm so worried about, what will happen after the war. Like, this is like worrying situation, right?
that it's sturdy politically. But the concern that I have is that what you call watering down, I would call like integration.
And the thing is that right now, during this war situation, is not a topic that many people are actually willing to discuss because it becomes like you're worried about something that's so far in the future, when right now we need to actually worry about Russia being repelled, right? And that's actually true as well, right? It is way more complicated with ethnic nationalism in Ukraine than just Azov. Oh yeah, definitely. People really focus on the Azov battalion, but the whole situation is far more complicated than just Azov battalion. If it was just a problem of a battalion or something, then you just, that would be pretty, at this point, it would not be difficult to quote unquote deal with, right?
And normalization. That by having people in the Azov battalion washed into the mainstream military, they get quieter, they get less overtly anti-Semitic because that stuff doesn't sell, but they still quietly try to build power within those institutions. That is, after all, what happened in Germany after the fall of the Third Reich. And it's...
Right. And this is also very complicated because the things that are based and they're great now because they're done in the atmosphere of the fervor and fight against a common enemy, a historical enemy of Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, and actually Belarus as well, but Belarus is a puppet state. Many things might become pretty bad in peacetime, move more far right.
It's what's happening right now in America, where they stay, more quiet, and they go like, okay, we have some legitimacy now. We can gain accreditation as heroes of Ukraine. We have sacrificed ourselves. We've laid our blood and sweat on the line to defend it against Russian invasion. And now we have some legitimate institutional power. So we have to keep quiet for a bit, but one day, we'll take back what's ours. And this happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Vaush is making that illegitimate of a point here, right? Like, if you have pretty extremist, you should not really allow extremist organizations to fester within within structures, especially structures like the military, right? As Karasu said before, sort of integrating them into the military was a step to not allow them to be like sort of warlords in the reality of 2014 Ukraine. But I think the more important next step is to basically dissolve the thing once it becomes part of the regular army, right? I think the most important thing would be to separate the members into separate units within the military, to basically dissolve the organization, right? Dissolve the unit, to separate the people that make up the pretty extremist organization, right? To not allow it to fester, to do recruiting. We even mentioned recruiting people from abroad to gain combat experience, like to I think it's important to dissolve such an organization once it's incorporated into the military, because like we had some really good examples of how extremists from abroad were brought in to train, right? Or were approached as recruiters. I think Vaush should really get some more historical analogies when it comes to far-right ideologies. Anastazja did want to engage a couple of times just because of the Azov Wehrmacht comparison. Yeah, but like, let's get in. Let's see what happens.
All the time with far-right ultranationalist groups. Now, whether or not that's actually going to play out, like, obviously, I don't know.
And of course, there's the whole history between Ukraine and Poland, when after the war there were whole groups that would strike at Poland and murder many people. That was like, it's very, very, very bloody and very complicated.
No, and at the moment, I don't think it will. In particular, I don't think that Euro and NATO skeptic vibes in Ukraine are going to survive the war with Russia. I think that the pro-EU, pro-NATO sentiment...
The pro-EU sentiment is pretty strong at the top, right? President Zelensky is making big strides to get Ukraine accepted into the EU. There are many moves, but the problem is, once again, what will happen when peace comes, right? Should Ukraine repel Russia? After all, Poland was also very eager to join the European Union, and now the far-right government in charge is one of the first, together with Hungary, #1 Eurosceptics. I think the Minister of Justice of Poland has called the funding from the European Union a German scam, right? Like the European Union funding is called a scam and many other things. So like Poland was very eager to join the European Union and now it's extremely Eurosceptic. So just because the Euroscepticism is not really popular right now at the top because of the war conditions, it does not follow that it could not change during peacetime. So as Timero said, I just hope they don't go the same route as Poland. Exactly.
Just too strong. I think that Ukraine has a bright future ahead of it, and I don't think any effort to subvert that with some kind of weird isolatory ultranationalism would work. But I do think...
But there is more at play here, right? It's not really isolated ultranationalism. Like, what my worry is that Russia gets repelled, that's a really good scenario, and there's this fervor of big nationalism within the whole country. Poland and Ukraine get close. Certain far-right ideas from Poland spread into the politics of Ukraine, and, you know, it goes from there. Like, it's not actually... It's not as obvious as one might think that the future of Ukraine is super bright. What I'm saying, you know? Yeah, but it's the same in Poland, right? Like many people in Poland want to stay, like the European Union, but what is important is how the attitudes of the people in charge sort of change with time, right? Does that make sense? And this is what I'm worried about, the relations between Poland and Ukraine, because they are relations at the top. So, right? Like, President Zelensky is a great wartime president, but I'm not that familiar with what his overall politics is during peacetime, right? Like that, does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Efforts are being made.
I am slightly worried.
Of photos of Ukrainian soldiers who have like weird Nazi memorabilia patches on their shoulders and stuff. And a lot of Western leftists, they see this and they misinterpret it. They think, oh, look at this, they're all Nazis. That's not true. In reality,
yeah, there is that danger. Especially since Ukraine has a pretty far-right neighbor with which Ukraine is now in great relationship, you know? So, yeah.
Reality, it's a small
Like,
group
of course, it's an amazing, like, the best thing in the world would be like if a great progressive government emerged in Ukraine and if it influenced Poland. But I'm not sure if this is a realistic scenario, if that makes sense, you know?
Nazis in the military making an effort to be in front of every camera shot because they want to front themselves. It's the same reason why a lot of U.S. military officials over in Iraq and Afghanistan were very keen on promoting like Western Christianity in the photo ops that they would do over there because they want to overemphasize the presence they have in the in the occupation. You know, they want to overemphasize their involvement. In truth, like, edgy statements aside, if you're like a Nazi in the Azov battalion, like a proper Nazi, I mean, you know, like ideologically, I think the best thing that you can do is obviously the best thing, like the best thing you could do is fight, win, and be de-radicalized. You know, I'm big on that narrative. If I wasn't, I wouldn't have so many former alt-righters in my community.
All right.
But if you're not going to be de-radicalized, if we can magically assume that you're going to stay a Nazi your whole life or whatever, I think the best thing you can do for your country is to fight and die defending it against Russia. That way, you defend against Russia, and you rid Ukraine of your subversive and destructive political ideology. I mean, a great many of them did that down in Mariupol, so it seems they're taking that advice to heart anyway. I know that in reality, people always have the ability to change.
What is that thing she did with her hands? Did she start losing her patience and started counting down? What was that? I think this was like this gesture of sort of trying to keep cool. That was interesting, right?
But also in reality, oftentimes they don't. And there are really bad consequences to the valorization of far-right ultra-nationalist military brigades, you know, in the context of making them national heroes. We saw what that did with Bandera, after all. I mean, he was a Nazi collaborator and hailed as a hero of Ukraine because the ultra-nationalist element was seen as a, like a...
Not because he was a Nazi.
No.
He was fighting against Soviet Union and Nazis.
Exactly. But he was a Nazi collaborator until they rejected him.
Yeah, like this is like the history that I explained, right? That Ukraine saw a big chance at freedom, right? Like Ukraine saw a big chance at freedom, and so there was this moment when they thought the Germans that were invading USSR could free Ukrainians and allow them to fight alongside them against the USSR, who were the oppressors. And then, because the Nazis saw Ukrainian, among other Slavic people, as the Untermensch, like the below human, they killed them indiscriminately as well. And so you could say that Ukrainian people got just simply burned, right? So this is the part of history that is being discussed here, right?
At a point, yes.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right?
Sure.
Being an ultra-nationalist means that you get to be a hero in spite of having done that. And that's my concern.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I worry about. It whitewashes, you know?
See, like, this is the slightly complicated part of this thing, right? Not that after Vaush said that he was a Nazi collaborator, she said for a time. I don't know, but that was a bit sus to me. Kind of like she was excusing him at that point. All right. Because keep in mind, like, this is like also the part of this nationalistic fervor. She is like she has a nationalistic bent. You need to remember that.
Three things. First thing, you said that you don't mind and cannot mind like Nazis dying. You think it's like a a good thing, essentially. But you yourself admitted that that you don't know if the most of the Azov battalion are Nazis. So when you did not wrote Nazis in Azov should put guns in their mouths and kill themselves. You did not say dox the locations of Nazis in Azov battalion. You said just Azov battalion. And most of people there are not Nazis. That's the first thing. So I really don't get how it explains why it's okay to say that, because I understand wishing Nazis to die. But you said yourself, you don't know. Are they Nazis? Are they not? You don't know.
Well, it would be
And
like...
that's one thing.
Oh, I just want to say, it would be like me saying, I don't really care about, like, Wehrmacht losses in the siege of Stalingrad. The majority of the Wehrmacht weren't, like, committed ideological Nazis. A lot.
Yeah, that's true. That is, Vaush is making a pretty valid point here. The majority of the Wehrmacht people were not actually ideological Nazis. This is often overlooked, but it is important to remember. Bandera is really complicated. He was supported by the USSR too between the two world wars for a while. As Bandera had an anti-Germanic pro-Slavic politics. Yeah. Carasso is correct on this point. Like, the topic of the collaboration of Ukraine and with the Third Reich is very complicated. And keep in mind, it is like in Polish high school when I went, it was taught as a complicated thing, even though Poland and Ukraine has had a really bloody history, right? It was a really complicated topic. Like, to fully understand, we really need to go into a deep dive to what happened from the aftermath of World War I to the creation of the People's Republic of Ukraine, to the invasion of the USSR, and to how Ukrainian people, the situation in which the Ukrainian people overall found themselves in after World War I, you know? Like, the soil was very fertile for ultra-nationalism to form because of what happened after World War I forward. This is like a very messy history.
A lot of them were just dipshit German recruits.
Are we really doing that? Are we really comparing those people to Wehrmacht?
Well,
those
wait.
People who literally defend their homeland, did not hurt a fucking anyone, did not do any anti-Jewish pogroms, did not commit any crimes, did not have this rhetoric published anywhere.
That's not really true, though, is it? Keep in mind that there were many awful happenings because of the, like, this, you do have to remember that this battalion is an ideological sort of continuation of the Bandera thing, etc., right? And let me see, we will look into this a bit, right? When we talk about the pogroms. Rzeź Polaków, Ukraina, druga wojna, right? Rzeź Wołyńska, right? Here we go. Like, this is like a pretty important okay, another server point though, that the conditions here are different. They are, but there's like a, that is true. But let's look at this. The massacre of Poles in Volhynia and Eastern Galicia were carried out in German-occupied Poland by the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, or the UPA, with the support of the local Ukrainian population against the Polish minority in Volhynia, Eastern Galicia, or parts of Polesia and Lublin region from 1943 to 1945. The peak of the massacres took place in July and August 1943. Most of the victims were women and children. Many of the Polish victims, regardless of age or gender, were tortured before being killed. Some of the methods included rape, dismemberment, or immolation, among others. The UPA's actions resulted in between 50,000 to 100,000 deaths. Right? So this is like important to also keep in mind, right? Yeah, it is an important distinction. I would agree with that. Right? Yeah, it is an important. So let me see something really quick. But being invaded and fighting war that defensive against forest that causes harm is different than fighting an invasive war when you cause harm. Yeah, it's true. It is different. Wehrmacht soldiers were, even when they were not ideological, was looting and harming people in Eastern Front. Yeah, that is also correct. They were part of the invasion force, not a defensive one that murdered people. There is massively important difference. If you can't see this, you just can't deal with reality. Yeah, Karasu is like, yeah, it is an important distinction. Because it also influences the actions that happen, right?
Do we like truly comparing this? You think a good comparison?
I'm only talking about Nazi-affiliated or associated military.
Yeah, true. And you're just essentializing people and seeing color without being able to understand the material conditions.
Military groups in which not every member is an actual Nazi. In the Wehrmacht, there were tons of people, even towards the end, like post-Battle of the Bulge, you know, when the Germans were fighting in Germany. The majority of the people who were recruited to the Wehrmacht by that point were like 15-year-old boys. I mean, they were, you know, hardly like the like SS members, hardly like ideological warriors of Nazism.
They were recruited in a Nazi army, in a country that attacked other people, that committed genocides. You cannot possibly compare people who went to defend their homeland to this. It's
well,
just,
I think it would
doesn't
depend.
work.
It would depend on their reasoning.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I don't think that's. I think there are better comparisons to be made. To be honest, do you know? You want a better comparison? Do you want a better comparison? I will make a better comparison than Vaush. Okay. I will make a better comparison than Vaush right now. Are you ready for a better comparison than Vaush did? Are you ready? You might not agree with my comparison, but I think I've got a better comparison than Vaush just did, than the Wehrmacht. Yeah? Listen to Lucy, everybody. I think Lucy is a very good example. I get what Vaush is trying to do. He wants to compare the ideologies, not the totality of their actions. But yeah, his arguments must be made. Yes, I'm ready. Karasu, listen to me saying to... listen to my example, Karasu. I think you might know it even. I think you might be interested in. So stay for my example. You know? Karasu, stay for my example. Right? Karasu, I think I got a comparison that you might like more. So, have you ever heard of the so-called... I don't know how it will be in English. Let's see. There we go. Have you ever heard of the so-called żołnierze wyklęci, Wiki? Have you ever heard of the so-called cursed soldiers in Poland? Are you familiar with the topic of the doomed soldiers, Karasu? Have you ever heard about it, the cursed soldiers? Or is this topic totally new to you? Has any of you heard of the so-called cursed soldiers? Like, let's see. Let's see how many of you know about this. Because I think this is closer to the Azov battalion than one might think. And I will explain. I will read a bit of the wiki and then I will explain to you why I think so. Ready? The chat went quiet. The chat went so quiet. The cursed soldiers, also known as the doomed soldiers, accursed soldiers or damned soldiers, Polish żołnierze wyklęci, or indomitable soldiers, is a term applied to a variety of anti-Soviet and anti-communist Polish resistance movements formed in the later stages of World War II and its aftermath by members of the Polish underground state. No, that's fine. This all-encompassing term for widely heterogeneous movement was introduced in the early 1990s. The clandestine organizations continued their armed struggle against the communist regime of Poland well into the 1950s. The guerrilla warfare included an array of military attacks launched against the regime's prisons and state security offices, detention facilities for political prisoners, and concentration camps that were set up across the country. Most of the Polish anti-communist groups ceased to exist in the 1950s as they were hunted down by agents of the Ministry of Public Security and Soviet NKVD. The last known cursed soldier, Józef Franczak, was killed in an ambush in 1963. Right? They will be very... This is a group that will be actually extremely glorified in Poland. Right? So this is like basically a resistance army that formed after World War II to fight against the newly formed communist government in Poland, right? Quote unquote communist. The Soviet imposed government in Poland. And on one side, one could view them as heroes because they were trying to defend Poland against the occupant, against an invader even, right? The Soviet imposed government. But on the other side, this army of this army of quote-unquote freedom fighters committed many atrocities. They raided villages not just for collaboration, they also raided villages because for supplies. They raided villages for many different reasons. They murdered people, they murdered whole villages, which is like the more dark part of the legacy of those soldiers. And I think this is like a good comparison, right? That on one hand you could say that they did some good things by defending from an occupier, but on the other hand they committed big atrocities, because the Azov battalion did also commit certain atrocities in the so-called gray areas, and things like that, right? And they're being glorified because of being the defenders against yeah. Yeah. Actually, I had a really good history teacher, but my grandfather, who was like a extreme expert on history, my grandfather, he told me the full story of the cursed soldiers, and he told me that young people his age, right after the war, were actually being sent to fight the cursed soldiers in bloody battles that resulted in many young people dead, you know? So I think this is a better comparison than the comparison to the Wehrmacht, right? So yeah, I live in Poland right now, so I see a lot of żołnierzy wyklęci walcząca hoodies. The glorification is insane. I remember my high school teacher refusing to talk about the full story. Yeah, my grandfather told me about the whole story. He actually introduced me to the topic very carefully, right? First, he gave me an article about them. Then he explained his side of the story. He gave me the full picture, right? So I think this is like a more apt comparison. Like, I think it's fair to point out that a defensive force forming is a different situation than a invading army that attacks other countries. I think it's fair to point out that it's not a good comparison.
Oh boy!
To make, right? Right? Are we all in agreement? Are we all agreeing on this? Right. Yeah, but the point Karasu was making is not that Nazis are not dangerous and they should not be treated as dangerous. It was that comparing a defensive force is not, that it's not a good comparison, you know? And of course, there was the early Polish resistance against German invading force, which included people who racialized and contained quasi-fascists. Like, it's like, that's also a good example to give, right? The point is that we don't want to essentialize, right? That is the point. That essentialization is not good, right? There are many different situations that create different, not exactly the same groups, right?
In terms of like
reasoning was defend my homeland from Russia. That's the reasoning.
Yes, but it really depends
on
why they're doing it as well. And this is why I worry about ultranationalism being a kind of whitewashing force for like far-right neo-Nazism, right?
Yeah, long term, I really worry about that as well, right? What will happen once there is peace?
You can want to defend your homeland for very wrong reasons. It's true that the Azov battalion is fighting a defensive war, and the Wehrmacht was most certainly not. But in terms of like the moral character of the people in those armies, in the SS, pretty much everyone was enough.
Yeah, there is like there is an invasion right now, and that's like a very powerful factor, right? When it comes to discussing things like the Azov and
Nazi. There's no getting around that. But in the Wehrmacht, the reasons people would have joined up or been recruited would vary enormously. To give you another example of this like principle in action, I don't think the majority of the people who are invading Ukraine, like Russian soldiers, are ideologically anti-Ukraine. I mean, a lot of them are conscripts, and a lot of them are just, you know...
Not all of them are, but not all, for sure.
I'm sure a lot of them are, but hardly all of them. But for the same reason.
Yeah, after all, there is a whole program called I Want to Live, created by Ukraine, where Russian conscripts can contact Ukraine and give up safely, you know, which is a pretty interesting thing, right?
When I see Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine, I know a lot of those people are probably good people who are just, by sociological circumstance, thrown into situations in which they are playing the bad guy, but they are still the invaders. And for that reason,
again,
I can't...
there are invaders. There are invaders. We are not, and we never have been.
Yes, but in that instance, we're just talking about, like, whether or not every member of that group is an adherent to an ideology or belief system that I think is harmful. Even if there was a purely defensive conflict.
Sure, but you don't know the reasoning. You don't know who these people are. You yourself said that you don't know if there are Nazis. And I'm pretty sure that at least half of them, if not more, are not. So I explained to you the situation already. And yeah, so this is my issue. I don't think it's a good way to do it. I don't think I, again, respect you. This is nothing like, you know, I'm not like trying to paint you as like a awful person for saying that. I'm just trying to explain that to me it's very brutal to say something like that to people who are, first of all, defenders of this country, and second of all, are not Nazis. Not all of them, not even the half of them.
Okay.
So if they were like actively committing like some shit against Jews, if they were like, even if they were talking about it, that's another conversation, but they don't.
To use a specifically defensive context then, to be a little bit more broad, only using like the defensive force involved, I also would not care that much about the death of Polish ultranationalists during the invasion from Nazi Germany in '39, or right-wing ultranationalist Brits who were killed in the Blitz by the Luftwaffe. In large part because even if they're on the defensive side of things, we're talking about people with fundamentally genocidal ideologies. Or like, yeah, like the Ku Klux Klan or something, or ultra far right, or like Of
course, there's a lot to be said about how far right was the Poland before World War II. That's a whole other switch, because there was a whole coup. Like, it was like, that becomes a whole complicated thing on its own as well, right?
There were divisions of U.S. Pacific military brigades who fought against the Japanese, horribly racist, who went out there and combated them. And I don't really care about their losses either, you know? Whether or not every single member of these groups is like ultra far right aligned or whatever, as a general association, like the point that I'm making is that a war which at its end sees the fewest number of far right people alive is one which, you know, ensures the greatest likelihood of peace at the end. Obviously, the greatest priority is Ukraine winning, but that's why I think that the Azov battalion should be allowed to fight, and I've encouraged that.
So for you, the general association with a far-right ideology is enough to condemn people to die?
Well, I'm not actually condemning people to die. I'm making a sort of errant statement on group affiliation, which I would in many other cases. I've made jokes about 9/11. I don't think it's out of line.
I see.
At least in this case, we're talking about people who have the potential to do real harm.
But how do we know that?
Because
I mean, they have zero power. Battalion. They are not glorified because some of them are anti-Semitic. They're glorified because they literally spilled blood for me to sit here.
Like Bandera.
That's why they're glorified.
They're glorified for being ultra-nationalists as a way of covering up their far-right views. To be quite fair,
Bandera is pretty controversial figure because unlike Azov, he actually did kill Jews. So, you know, he's way worse in that sense because he's literally but did commit crimes against Jews and Poles as well.
Do you think the Azov war?
Yeah, like the UPA, right? The article that we've read about the UPA, right?
No.
Why not?
Definitely
it was started
not.
by a Nazi.
Because it's not a Nazi battalion anymore. They don't spread that the word. Most of them are just regular people who I personally know, by the way, and who are not Nazis, who are not anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form. And this is not the vibe. This is not would be if they did. If I knew that one of them actually were incredibly anti-Semitic and committed some kind of crime against a Jew, they should be prosecuted. Fuck that motherfucker. We do not stand for this here.
No, I get that. I'm not impugning you here. But the Azov battalion was a militia group founded by Nazis who ideologically
8 years ago.
Yes.
There's been a big change.
Their founding has had an influence on the ideological predispositions of the group. Do you think
No, wait, not an influence. The founder was a Nazi. Let's put it plainly. I'm not just trying to, sugarcoat it. The founder was straight up a Nazi, but it does not. A lot of them are no longer affiliated with them. People like Nemechev are no longer.
Right. I think there is a lot of downplaying of this happening here right now. You know, like 8 years is not that a long time, and even though there has been the incorporation into the army, we already had examples of recruitment happening and many other things, right? What should have asked, how does she know there aren't Nazis anymore? I'm curious if it's anything more than because I know them. Yeah, that is an interesting question. That is a good question.
With Beletsky as well, they condemned him, they denied any connection with him, and I have no reason to doubt it at this point because
that's her entire argument when it comes to their beliefs. They aren't bad anymore. I know a lot of them, they aren't like that. Yeah, that's that's not a good argument. 8 years is not that long ago. If she said like they were formed 30 years ago and there have been a lot of changes during that time, then I would have been more willing to believe it, right? But if it's like they were formed 8 years ago, then, that's not quite enough to make drastic changes to an organization, unless you take a lot of real effort to sort of break it apart once it becomes incorporated into the army. For example, if the Azov battalion was basically dissolved into many different battalions, when as individuals they could basically would not be able to organize or do any recruiting or radicalization, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
There are no credible organization aside from Russian fakes that truly found them committing any crimes against Jewish people in the occupied areas.
But what you're saying right here, again, this is the thing. I'm not talking about whether or not they've committed crimes against the Jewish people. I'm talking about whether or not it's possible that ideologically they would have did exactly what Bandera had done if the socioeconomic
No,
circumstances were permissive. Right now, we don't live
not
in a
now.
world where the people in Ukraine can just up and, facilitate a Holocaust. That's just not a thing that can happen right now. But I think that if you went back 80 years, a lot of the people, if taken from now to then in the Azov battalion, would have been collaborators. Certainly they're ideologically in line with that. The only difference between now and then is that now they're being given a pretext for ultranationalism and national self-defense without it being, directly framed through Nazi collaboration. And that's good, but the ideology is still there.
There's nothing in them, in their ideology. They are battalion. I'm not talking about a political party. Those are two different things. They are not anywhere there. You can see phrases like Ukraine for, white Ukrainians. It's not.
No, it's like this is more complicated than that. Like many far-right ideas and many far-right ideologies, many radical ideologies were not spread just by political parties, but rather by military units, right?
Their text. It's not something they talk about at all.
Well,
in fact,
yeah, that's smart of them,
Sorry?
right? But the fact that they're not a political
I
party,
see. So
if they're still a militia,
you're incapable of believing that they are true about that. You think they are just hiding their power level, basically, is what you think.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of people in the Azov battalion who do that. That makes sense for a far-right group.
Yeah,
to
of
do,
course.
and they've been doing that
Yeah.
all around the world.
And they did
again,
recruiting, so it's not like, oh, they've been incorporated into the army and they've all changed their way, right? Like the 8 years is not a lot. 8 years is an extremely short time.
And what we've seen right now in Germany, after the fall of the Third Reich, not every Nazi was persecuted.
8 years is
A
nothing.
lot of them have sown seeds in the police and military defense, and right now there are a bunch of neo-Nazi militias in the hills of Germany, because only
In case in point, there was an attempted coup.
generations ago, a lot of those people's ancestors would have themselves been members of the Nazi Party. They keep quiet. They talk about dog whistles. They talk about German sovereignty, and they talk about immigration.
I understand.
And
what you
eventually
mean.
they have
I understand.
right. Well, we see this in America too. I agree
They're
that
nothing like that.
well, I agree that not
I'm
every
sorry.
person in the Azov battalion is like a card-carrying neo-Nazi. I definitely think there's a predisposition ideologically to the group.
Yeah, but again, I did not address this point. It was the initial points you made after I finished talking. One of them
Alright.
was that you are kind of afraid that they will be, get some power, something like that. They have zero power even before Russian invasion. The political party had 0 seats, 0. Nobody voted for those fuckers, like Beletsky and his party. I mean, in the beginning and in the second election, in both elections. So they have 0 influence. Nobody supports that shit. Literally, very few people. And what kind of power can they have? People do not praise any of that. People only praise defenders of Azovstal, for example, who, by the way, you wished to die. Those people as
If they're Nazis,
heroes.
sure.
You didn't say that. You said just Azov battalion.
Well,
So for
yeah,
them, you made this generalization that they're all Nazis.
the same way I would say I don't care if people died in the Wehrmacht, but then if you ask me so what if there was a person in the Wehrmacht who actually
again,
wasn't
Wehrmacht.
wait, this is a valid comparison. If
I'm not sure about the Wehrmacht comparison,
said I don't care if people die in the Wehrmacht, and you're like, okay, what if someone was in the Wehrmacht but they were recruited, they're not an ideological Nazi, and also they won a defect, and I'm like, okay, well, that
it's
person,
not a good comparison.
I am only okay, fine, let's use a different comparison. In the United States Civil War, the North invaded the South, but the North were on the defending team. The South started the war at Fort Sumter.
Yeah, no.
Right.
Mhm.
So there were groups of Northerners who were led by generals who were
Yeah, see, he instantly loses it on the Wehrmacht comparison.
fully pro-slavery. There were military divisions from the north that were like not ideologically in disagreement at all with the South. The only reason they were invading the South was for like national unification. They wanted to stomp the Southern traders, but they weren't like anti-slavery. They were just on the other team. Now, if I said, let's say there was like a battalion of them called like, I don't know, like Fuckers Battalion, Pickles Battalion, right? Pickle. Let's go with Pickle. Okay. Pickles Battalion. And Pickles Battalion, they're doing good work, okay? They're shooting Confederates. I love it when they do that. But these people ideologically are pro-slavery. After the Civil War, they are going to fight to keep slavery in the South and push for it in Western expansion. If the people in Pickles Battalion died while fighting, I really wouldn't give a damn. Even if not every soldier in that group was ideologically pro-slavery, you know, and I can get specific if we're talking specifics, like, okay, well,
That's
maybe
a
that
better
person just signed
example.
up because of this.
That is a better example than the Wehrmacht, I have to admit.
Reason. But I think it would be okay for me to say broadly, like, yeah, I don't really care if they lose this battle, because at the end of the day, they're only on the right side because they happen to be born there. They aren't ideologically in the right. And the Azov Battalion also is not ideologically in the right. They defend Ukraine because they're in Ukraine. But ideologically, a lot of those people are advocates of politics worse than what Russia advocates for.
I understand. You think?
Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them.
Deeply disagree with everything you just said, because not because it's a bad comparison, this one is better, but I know where we disagree. Actually, it's not I don't disagree with what you're saying. I would agree with it 100% actually if they were actually ideologically propagating awful things, and most of them are not, and they have zero power. So yeah, so this is why we disagree, because you see them as this like originally evil force, basically. Sorry for using this colorful language, but basically, you know, like this, the force that.
Okay, I think I'm seeing the disconnect here, right? I think the disconnect is that Vaush said that ideologically there are people there that want things that is even worse than what Russia wants, which is I'm not even sure I agree with this, since what Russia wants right now is actually pretty close to what the Nazis wanted. You know, there's like it's a pretty genocidal war after all. And maybe what she's saying, that Russia actually does have the power to do the awful things should they win, and the individual within the battalion will never have the chance to realize any of their ambitions, even if they had them. I think that is basically what she's saying.
Potentially will, you know, bring some very evil stuff.
Right?
But I just don't think it is. It's not like that. Most of them are just regular people from Kharkiv.
And to Vaush, from Vaush's perspective, is like they might not have the power right now to do anything, but they might serve as a radicalizing force to bring more and more people into this sort of ideology, which will create harm further along the road. And if they died, and then that danger further along the road would be stopped, basically, right?
Donbass were not Nazis.
That's the case for all armies.
Does that make sense?
Really? I mean, in a sense,
all
we
armies
call
are
it like
composed
that,
mostly
right?
of normal people.
Azov is not the entire army. You know that. I'm not going even to address that. It's like
But
1,000
all
people.
battalions are
you guys know
composed
that.
mostly of normal people, right? Like you could literally any army, any force.
Yes,
from
but
the
what I'm
Mongol
trying to
hordes
say
and-
is that it is not their ideological drive anymore. It's not. They're not there to. There's just no point in that in Ukraine at whatsoever. Let me tell you a little bit of a story, just to address why it's so. I guess I cannot breach this. Maybe I don't have like the words for it, and I will tell you. I understand what you mean. I just understand that we are seeing things differently in that sense, because I don't see them as this threat as you do. I don't see them as this, ideologically evil force that has some good people in it by chance. I don't see them like that. So this is why I guess we disagree, because the examples you bring I would actually agree with. I just don't see Azov as those examples. And this is why, basically.
Okay, tell us.
So here's the thing. I told this story, I think, to not so erudite. I think you know her. I think you talked with her.
Oh no, not
Kyla.
erudite.
And the story basically is about my friend who I met him when I was in the university, and he initially escaped from Russian invasion in 2014. He was from Mariupol.
Okay,
And
Mariupol.
basically what happened is he and other people, most of my friends are from Donbass for some reason, I don't know why it happened in the university. Basically, they all moved to other cities in Ukraine, right? To not be occupied by Russia and not to be part of this Donetsk People's Republic shit, you know,
Right,
probably
Donetsk,
about it.
no, yeah.
So they moved to Kharkiv, to Kiev, you know, to other cities, basically.
Yeah.
So let's call him Stas. He moved as well. So he moved
Stash? Okay.
to Kharkiv. But then he just couldn't deal with this shit, and he told us, me and my best friend who is now fighting, that he will be enlisting to defend his home. He cannot let Russians take it, and he just cannot allow it. He wants to defend his home, his loved ones, and Mariupol was, as you probably know, back in the day, defended.
Yeah,
so
Mariupol,
they
yeah,
did not let
remember.
Russians take it, basically.
Okay.
And he then, oh sorry, my computer is about to die. Fuck, no. Don't do that.
I remember.
A minute. So he enlisted in Azov, which was the only battalion at the time that defended, you know, east, and also a lot of them were from Mariupol, and he wanted to defend his hometown first and foremost. And since then, for 8 years, he has been fighting in the battalion and fighting for Ukraine. And then when this phase of war began in February, he was the one who also, you know, they had amazing experience in fighting. They were like one of the best soldiers at that point. So they were sent to the toughest places, like Mariupol, which you probably know. I think you heard, right? You talked about it, I think, about Azovstal.
Yes.
And so he was there. And
Yeah, so basically, but I think saying then what is bad, but church and murder is worse, right? Yeah, this is like when it becomes a bit complicated, because I remember the situation in Mariupol. The Azov battalion was in there, and if that personal friend joined that battalion because like it was the only battalion that could be joined, right?
And we lost connection with him. And basically the last thing he said was that he's going to probably kill himself because, sorry, a bit emotional. So he apologized. So he basically said he was going to kill himself because he doesn't want to be taken by Russians. He knows what they do.
Right, it was
he
like
knows what they do to.
It's a very difficult situation, the defense of Mariupol, right? Like I think we've all know about
especially as of prisoners, as you can imagine, probably they were like their image in Russia is very inflated in this like this boogeyman, you know, Nazi stuff, and they are like many Russians show Azov soldiers, captured ones, as an example. They like torture them, do horrendous shit with them, honestly, like genitalia mutilation, like they look like concentration camp victims when the ones we got back.
The issue, of course, that during the defensive war, it's very difficult to assume that extent people fighting along each other means an ideological commitment. Yeah, that's a very good point. And that was a good example on Anastazja's part, I think, you know? That is a good example and a good point. And this is why people thinking as of compare Wehrmacht is, yeah, this is not a, yeah, you're right, this is not a good example. The Wehrmacht example was not a good one.
So he knew that his comrades were taken, and he said that he is very injured. And
at the moment, the conditions of who is not part of Azov is different. Yeah, because there might be people that joined the battalion during the war that were not indoctrinated into it, but just wanted to join any battalion, no matter what it was, to defend a particular place, right? So that is actually a very good point. Are you guys think spitting a hair by Anna is actually important difference on the ground? Right, that is a good point. Right? That is a good point. Of course, the difficult and complicated part becomes what comes after, right? What becomes of the battalion after the war is done? What becomes of the potential power to indoctrinate after the war is over, right? That is like a thing that becomes like a pressing problem after the war, right? When Azov is often the only one giving the training locally and many people are ready to receive such training, it's a luxury from outside saying anyone takes such training, those fascists. Yeah. That is a good point. Like, it becomes really complicated. Like, this becomes a complicated topic and we should treat it as such, right? We should not think about what should happen to them now, and we should rather think about how we can dissolve and de-radicalize the organization after the war is over. Does that make sense? Like, the situation is pressing right now to defend against an invasion, and I think the matter of the far-right elements in the Azov battalion become a pressing matter after the war. But of course, there are my worries about what will happen after the war. Right? Does that make sense? So I think Anastazja gave a really good example here of her friend. But it becomes a pretty, like, it becomes a very difficult conversation of what happens after the war. And I'm a bit worried about it, you know? Things that are good right this moment could very well potentially become very dangerous further down the road.
He participated in taking more than thousands of people out, civilians, out of Azovstal.
Like, this is what makes this conversation extremely difficult, right? That there is no super simple answer to this dilemma. And Wehrmacht, I essentialize the fact that they are invasion army at that point. I condemn the fact of the invasion, yeah. Yeah, 100% it makes sense. I just wish we could call out far-right stuff about it being used as ammo against a fair cause. No matter what ideological stance a Wehrmacht soldier had, they were part of that machine. True. That's true.
So he saved thousands of lives, this person, and he then decided to basically shoot himself. Yeah. I don't know, honestly, if he did. Maybe he got taken. But this was basically the moment when I saw you saying that. They should put guns in their mouths and shoot themselves. So, yeah, sorry. Fuck, I don't know, I'm crying, stupid. So basically, yeah, I'm sorry for the emotions, but this is something I want you to consider. The man was Jewish. Jewish Greek, not a Nazi. A lot of them in Mariupol, by the way, Jewish.
Call out to concrete actions. Azov can be called out training far right Westerners, but not necessarily waging a defensive war. Yeah. Like, I agree 100%. I get the feeling we are saying the same thing from a different angle. Yeah.
Greeks for some reason. So yeah, this is the man you basically wish to kill themselves. And I think he took your advice. So yeah, that's the story. And this is a regular person in Azov. He was never anti-Semitic. He was a Jewish person, religiously Jewish, by the way, ethnically Jewish.
Yeah, he joined the battalion because it was the only battalion available to join in this particular situation of Mariupol. So it becomes extremely difficult and complicated, right? This is why we should be thinking about the radicalization after the war. Also, at this point, 8 years inside of a war against invasion, it's hard to say who is and who is not into Azov ideological alliance and who of fascism and neo-Nazism and who is because they are waging a defensive war.
Was incredibly kind and yeah, very actually kind of liberal in terms of like Ukraine. So very like even pro-LGBT, feminist, you know, not feminist. He didn't call himself that, but he was like pro women. It's cringe here for people, men especially, to call themselves feminists. So they would never say it, but he was like very pro women, pro choice. You know, decent person in all accounts. So this is a regular person in Azov, my friend who went to defend their homeland. But you, for some reason, and many other people are hell-bent on thinking all of them are Nazis just because their original creation was done by a Nazi. So yeah, sorry.
I'm very sorry that has happened. Yeah. You don't need to apologize for crying. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to get emotional over. I do take issue with your framing. You didn't take my advice. You never heard what I had to say. I want to be clear, because I feel like we have to apply a non-selective standard for the way in which we talk about stuff like this. There are good people in every fighting force that has ever existed in humanity. If you were able to sort through all of them, you could probably find some morally good SS members, like people who are secretly waiting for the regime to fall or whatever. I mean, literally anything, like even the most morally heinous. When you make broad denunciations of literally any fighting force, invariably, you're going to be wrapping, not just fighting force, groups of people. You're going to be wrapping in people who are undeserving of poor consideration. If you are talking about, like, I've talked about the Saudi royal family, I have talked about the military of North Korea, I've talked about the Russian military, I've talked about so many different groups with broad denunciations. I speak in historical terms. Which groups do I want to see survive after all of this is done? The answer is going to be obvious every time. I don't want any far-right group to survive, because those are the people that create the conflicts that end up killing more people down the line. Obviously, if you take a look at any historical conflict in World War II, who do I want coming out on the other side? Well, in the grand scheme of things, obviously, the people who won't do a second Holocaust. I mean, that seems reasonable. With regards to the Azov battalion, I want to...
Of course, when it comes to the Azov battalion, this just becomes a little bit of a, like, you know, oh, I wish to a little star that maybe Nazis within the battalion don't survive the skirmish, right? But in realistic terms, it becomes a topic of de-radicalizing people within the battalion and dissolving the battalion, right? Does that make sense? Because I'm not even sure if this sort of discussing of I wish none of the Nazis would survive the war is even helpful in any realistic way, right? Does that make sense? Like we should maybe talk in more pragmatic and realistic ways on how to deal with these sort of issues, right? That are pretty complicated. Like, as we discussed before, incorporating the Azov battalion was a way for the organization to become less harmful than it potentially could. And in my mind, the next step would be to de-radicalize and to separate its members, disallow them to form sort of cooperation and to spread certain ideologies, right? Or maybe even the more radical members even to remove them. But that is a different situation than what we are finding ourselves in right now, right? Does that make sense? It's not helpful at all. It feels virtue-signaling, of course. Vaush needs to keep his audience entertained, so he's bound to say something controversial every now and then. Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, it's not really a statement of anything. Like, it's not really a useful statement to say, oh, I just wish that all of the Nazis would not survive the war. I mean, okay, but that's not really speaking of any real solutions, right? Wishing to a falling star that all the evil Nazis within a battalion would not survive the war.
Be clear. This gets caught up in a lot of like anti-Ukrainian narrativizing that I have never bought into.
Like that, because it also does, it becomes complicated, let's just say.
Are there Nazis in the Ukrainian military? Yes. Are there in the American military? Yes. Are there in the Russian government? Yes. They are everywhere, unfortunately.
But true.
It's a popular ideology. And I have never bought into the idea that the existence of Azov, no matter its prominence in some forms of media or how often they flash their black suns at the cameras when they're given the opportunity, represents some kind of innately far-right tendency in the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military and people, as far as I can tell, are more liberal-leaning than the U.S. in a lot of ways. They might end up being one of the strongest bastions of liberal democracy in the West after what's going on right now in the U.S. and Western Europe. The reason I'm saying all of this is because I want to put like properly into context the things that I have said.
The Ukrainian military, after winning, of course, need to take a very close look at itself, inspect both the troops and leadership, and catch the extremism before taking power. Oh no, the Black Sun part is coming. Like, I think the problem of what comes after the war goes beyond just the military, right?
You talk about whether or not a broad statement.
Yeah, I mean, the process already started even after 2014 because, as we have discussed, part of the process was incorporating them into the military was part of that process, right? But 8 years is not... 8 years is not exactly a long time to fix this sort of problem, right? The reason why Azov started to try to invite Western far-right radicals to offer training for money is because they got less money and resources due to more checks on them. Yeah, right? So it's like, yeah, it becomes a difficult and complicated thing.
Statement about military fighting forces is made valid based on whether they're on the defense or attacking, whether they're legitimate or illegitimate in their broader course. And I understand that. I want the Azov battalion to contribute to a victory against Russia, after all.
Which rose due to hit on them as a group of Western media after the Christchurch shooting.
But in the long term, in the grand,
I want them to die in the process.
In the grand scheme of things, a world with fewer Nazis, however many of them there were before and are now, is a world more likely to have fewer people die needlessly in the future. As far as I'm concerned, the only reason the Russian invasion is happening is because of the Nazi-ish tendencies in the Kremlin. It's a recurring problem.
I would call them fascists more. Like Nazis is not there. Like
they
like
lean
anti-Semitic.
in.
They lean in for sure. Like fascists for sure. Yes.
They
but,
lean in.
Yeah, they're not. It's a bit hard to lean in because, like I said, their whole identity is built on winning against Nazis, you know? So it's really hard in Russia, again, like in Ukraine, to sell Nazism.
We see a lot of that here, too. Because there are a lot of, like, pro-Russia...
I guess that's a fair distinction, right?
Like, tanky types, you know? Who are ideologically fully in line with Nazis. Like, literally, they won't say Jews, they'll say Soros, but apart from that, they'll basically...
Yeah, I know that's up, yeah.
Yeah, this recurring issue, you know, and I would say the same in literally any other conflict.
Right.
For instance, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, right? Or in Afghanistan, right? We were the invaders in Afghanistan, but generally speaking, the Taliban were far, far worse than we are, you know? Like, in terms of moral disposition and political prescriptions, we may have invaded Afghanistan, but the Taliban are way worse in terms of what they want to do with Afghanistan relative to us. And we can see that now, in our absence, what they have done. The point that I
But keep in mind that then we have the invasion of Iraq, and then becomes a really, really messy problem because basically US has committed genocide in Iraq, you know, and Afghanistan was like in many ways a continuation of a certain anti-Muslim narrative. Like it is something that I am preparing myself to create material about. So, right? So this, like the Iraq, Afghanistan, like this becomes a really, really complicated problem, right? Like that one is, especially that one is not as simple as first look might suggest, right?
is that in all of these conflicts, all of these sides, whether we're talking winner, loser, invader, defender,
Like I think the difference between them is that she's saying they are more like fascistic because the Nazis were basically their ideological enemies for a long time. And Vaush is saying they may not be Nazis in name, but many of their thought processes basically align to the Nazis. This is basically the divide between them, right?
so on and so forth. I have made many sweeping claims about which groups I want to win, which sides I want to see take prominence, which groups I think are more or less harmful, more or less deserving of death. But these ascriptions don't survive individual scrutiny. None of these are meant to be denunciations of any individuals because I don't know those individuals. Every person who from a distance is a member of some Nazi militia might interpersonally be like having doubts, or they might be totally in disagreement ideologically with the people around them but are going along with it because they really want to defend their country, or so on and so forth. This is the case in all these groups. I often engage in pretty like flippant language, and I think that for the most part this is like a fine thing to do. I don't mind.
Keep in mind that even in the context of Russian invasion, there's also the whole thing that there were genuinely Russian soldiers that were coming into Ukraine expecting that they are like rescuers almost, that they were going to go into Ukraine, fighting against some evil specter of Nazism, and that they would come into Ukraine and that they would be greeted with flowers. Like, there was this expectation among some of the soldiers, right? I think Vaush almost always talks about the thought process more than actions, which is sometimes a flaw because actions really do matter, especially in this case as people's lives are on the line. Yeah, I agree with this. Yeah.
Doing that, but I want to make it clear, whether I'm being inconsistent here or not with how flippant I was with talking about the Azov battalion people, the proper meaning of my statements, when given the highest level of scrutiny, are that I want even the Nazis in the Azov battalion, even the people who ideologically are condemned, like right across the line, I want them to contribute to a successful defense of Russia. As long as they are Nazis, for those who actually are, their ideology is one of...
I think Vaush had a slip. I think he meant Ukraine.
Groups. I often engage in pretty like...
I think he meant Ukraine and said Russia. Let me hear that again.
This is like a fine thing to do. I don't mind doing that. But I want to make it clear, whether I'm being inconsistent here or not with how flippant I was with talking about the Azov battalion people, the proper meaning of my statements, when given the highest level of scrutiny, are that I want even the Nazis in the Azov battalion, even the people who ideologically I would...
Like, of course, my feelings about this are going to be also complicated, right? Because Poland is pretty close to Ukraine, and we have like this shared history, etc., you know, going as far back as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And keep in mind that when Russia first invaded Ukraine, Polish people freaked out, right? Polish people started emptying their bank accounts. I wanted to withdraw some money from the bank, but there was zero money in the bank because there were people frantically taking out money from their account because they thought that Russia would invade and sort of roll over Ukraine, and then right away they will attack Poland as well, right? So this becomes like a really
like right across the line. I want them to contribute to a successful defense of Russia. As long as they are Nazis, for those who actually are, their ideology is one of genocide and they would have me dead. And so I cannot mourn their death. If I speak in groups,
Yes.
any groups, people who are not Nazis will be caught into this. But
Sorry, I would like to say, I think I maybe gave a wrong impression to people, which people hate you a lot, so I would like to correct it for people not thinking that I'm
Right.
doing that. I don't think you like bought in that all Ukrainians are Nazis. I'm perfectly aware.
Honestly, I had some scary thoughts at the beginning of the war. All those crazy scenarios about nukes and invasion, it was legitimately frightening. Yeah, for people like us, this is like very close to home, right? Like this is not some faraway place at the other side of the world. This is like keep in mind that Poland has received the most amount of Poland and Ukraine became really close over this. Ukrainian is one of the three most spoken languages in Poland right now. So it's complicated, right? It's a very complicated. Like I have my fears about what happens in Ukraine after the war, like about the influence of the far-right Polish government over Ukraine. I have my worries about like how certain extreme sentiments that are really useful during a defensive war could potentially turn into something harmful after the war, right? Does that make sense? Like it's all very complicated.
Where it's not even the point to talk about it because I've seen what
And it's all very close to home.
say about it, what your community says about it.
all
So
Americans
yeah, I
are
also
Nazis.
I also did not mean like that you
Yeah, but
literally at fault for that person, my friend, dying. Obviously not. He did not see you say that, and it's nothing like that. I just meant to imply that you have to maybe.
My family comes from near Lvov. They only moved west due to the war, and Polish-Ukrainian connections are they are deep. They are extremely deep, right? Like those connections go as far as back as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, as I said. Like part of my family comes from Lvov, right? From that region So I like from what I've heard from part of my grandmother's side, from my mother's side, family comes from Lviv as well, right? So these connections do really run really deep. So I will see these things in a very specific way. I will I can understand Vaush's point, but I can sort of understand Anastazja's point, when it comes to part of these things, Does that make sense?
Like consider like the language and what I guess the meaning of words, I guess, in that sense, because what you said is not why he possibly is dead or captured. Of course not. Yeah, but this flippant, I guess, disregard for their lives is what bothers me. I guess it's a good way to put it. Not from you even specifically, but from
like from Vaush's perspective is if there are extreme Nazis, then I wish them not to survive. And in her mind, it is just because my friend is in this battalion, you wish death upon him. This becomes like this sort of dynamic, right?
From many people, and
Even
yeah,
the actual
and
Nazis?
I don't think. Well, I guess so. I don't think they deserve death. They don't have like the, the power right now to, and they won't have it and here afterwards as well. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that most people talk about it in the way that they hate Nazism, they hate fascism, they call Russian fascists here in Ukraine all the time, like Ukrainians do, right? So this is not something, I don't think they want that to be, most of them are in any way will try to or want to.
Or this is something that this is the part that I'm really worried about, right? Like Poland, many horrible things, some of the most horrible things happened in Poland, right, during the World War II. The Holocaust, the death camps, the like Auschwitz and like Treblinka, those things happened in Poland, right? And you would think, wow, Polish people certainly could never like allow far-right rhetoric to rise to power or for like fascistic like thoughts to spread, right? But yeah, but here we are, right? Years later, we have a deeply far-right government. We have a very fascistic like government. So we should not assume that just because a country is fighting a defensive war against fascists, that far-right thought could not actually become popular in the country itself, right? Does that make sense? It's not a wise yeah, so it's not a really wise way of seeing the world, right? If we are to secure a better future, like after the dust had settled, so to speak, right?
Create any like far nationalist waves here or Nazi waves, and they don't have the power for it. So I'm not worried about it.
Like just because there is no power now, it does not follow that the extremists will never attain the power, right? It just does not follow, in my opinion, that it will never happen.
We thought that over here as well, though.
Like the situation right now is that Ukraine must absolutely repel Russia, but there is a very pressing question on what happens afterwards, after the dust had settled.
Is the issue, right? I mean, it's ideologically, ideologically, a Nazi would be committed to my death. Like it's not even a conditional thing. By virtue of my blood, I would be on the chopping block for them. And for that reason,
why is that? Are you a Jew actually or something?
They would I've certainly been called one by them. No,
I've been too as well.
Right.
The nose, you know.
They do
Yeah.
they do like
Yeah.
that. No, it would be, I assume, for my homosexual tendencies.
Oh, I'm not straight as well, so you know.
Well, then there we go.
I'm not the biggest fan of these guys, as you can probably imagine. They're not the biggest fans of me.
For me,
yeah,
it's not a matter of immediate harm. It's really difficult to know in the long term
Right,
how
it's
harmful
not
the presence of
it's not like that's also a good point. It's not a matter of immediate harm. We are thinking long term, right? After all the stones have settled.
Nationalist far-right militias will be in a country. Historically, that doesn't tend to go down very well when it comes to the acceptance of the ideologies that come with it. I can say right now that we're seeing a resurgence of fascism all across the West. in
Yes, that's true.
in ideologies that we thought were dead and buried. For me, it's like, you know, it's like you read like a local or like a news story about somebody who slipped on some ice on the stairs and died, and you're like, oh, that fucking sucks. And then you read down, they're like, oh yeah, so and so was a renowned local neo-Nazi seen at this event with an armband, Sieg Heiling, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't really care anymore. You know, it's not, I'm not advocating for like their arrest and execution. I do believe in freedom of speech. It's just like, as long as, you know, it's a matter of like where my sympathies are at. It's like, person dies, comma, that person wanted you dead anyway. And it's like, well, okay, fuck them then, I guess.
I agree with that. It's not my problem with what you said, honestly. If I like saw a pic of some Azov guy who died, like who were killed, I don't know, like for example with a bullet or something, you know, and I like for sure I knew that he was like a Nazi who like bashed Jews on the streets, you know, and gays, and maybe maybe be on one of those how do you call them, rainbow things I went to in Kharkiv. It's like pride, you know, like pride stuff, and we were, you know, hit by people, and you know it wasn't good, and most of it was those people, you know, and so yeah, maybe those. If I see that picture of that person dead, and I am for sure aware of what he was like as a person, be that heartbroken, like just like you, I'll be like, well,
it's like, you know? Yeah, I like, you know,
yeah,
you could have done a better job.
Well then, like, is there bonding?
Yeah, I agree.
Bonding.
I think I'm like bad at expressing what I mean. It's not that I disagree with what you said. I wouldn't be, of course, like that upset as I would for like a person who is not a fucking Nazi, for example, right? And but this is not, the thing is that you don't know if they are. In this case, I know they are this person, like a hypothetical person that like that was killed, and I know he like bashed my head when I was on Pride in Harvard, for example. This person, yeah, not a big fan, but I will implore people to maybe read up less biased, less Russian information about Azov, which you can find some nasty stuff about them for sure, especially Beletsky. Fuck that clown.
Well,
but you know,
we can't really know, because the thing is, like, there's an association.
That's my
right?
point.
Like the logo.
Association is not enough for me.
Well, it's not just association. Yeah. It's like founded by a Nazi, and you keep seeing Nazi imagery crop up in the people who are part of the battalion. There's no way to do a poll, and also Nazis lie all the time when polled on stuff like this.
Yeah.
They have to. Yeah. So I can't know, and you can't know. I guess like I'm trying to think of how I could best. If I was being like perfectly careful with my language, then I would have said, if you're a Nazi in the Azov battalion, like I don't care if you die or whatever. You know. But for me, it really depends on, like, I guess the critical Nazi percentage, where it's like, I don't know, like to go by the highest example, how many of the Wehrmacht were Nazis at the beginning of the war? Like what, maybe, I don't know, 90, 80? And then how many are the Azov are? 20? 30? I don't actually know.
People mostly say 30. Which
how much
is like
the American military? I don't even know.
How the fuck knows? I don't know. That's the way I don't like playing numbers game, because I agree with you 100% that you cannot like really tell. How the fuck will you tell? And yeah, but I guess just my concern is flippant disregard for people's life who are not Nazis in that battalion first and foremost, and quite a lot of them are not, like my friend who was a Jew.
It's because Vaush hates Rainbow Six.
A Jewish man, definitely not a Nazi. And,
you know, the Jewish Nazis. I'm kidding. I'm not saying your friend.
They exist.
Look, it's the internet. Lots of people out here. Look, in all seriousness, I want to be clear. You know, the callous disregard that I have for people's well-being here is really reserved for the people who want to do the Holocaust 2.0. If you're in the Azov battalion and you're not a Nazi, and I imagine that's the case for the majority of the people there, because it would be pretty difficult to maintain ideological purity in a militia that has been incorporated into the actual military. I don't know how they would discern their recruitment. Like, you know, oh, you're a Nazi, well, you're joining up with us. That'd be pretty tough to do. If you're not, you know, and you're a member of that group, difficult association optically, but fuck it. If you're not a Nazi, then God be with you. It's not a group denunciation applied to the individual. It's a group denunciation of the group. Of course, if you're a Nazi in the Azov battalion, then, you know, stop wanting to do a Holocaust, please.
I guess my the biggest thing is the, like I said, the disregard, and also it's not the policing of even of your language. It's just, I understand you're an edgy boy and you like edgy jokes. It's not that like that big of a deal to me. It's just that the concept
Edgy
itself,
boy?
I guess, that you, maybe it's because you like think there's like a very potential strong threat with them, which I don't see and I don't think is the problem. And yeah, maybe that's the reason. Maybe you think that if they gain like prominence and power, and it will be in the future potentially damaging
I
to
do
maybe
worry
LGBT people,
a little.
maybe.
I worry a
Yeah,
little, yeah, because
yeah,
you're all
yeah.
set up to be, because like here's the thing, right?
All right.
I think
Let's see.
oftentimes national politics
Let's see if like Vaush mirrors some of my worries for the future, right?
are defined oppositionally. America was pretty okay with Hitler before World War II began, right? Like, it was opposition to Nazism that stigmatized eugenics research in America. Having the Nazis as an enemy made America more left-leaning.
All right.
And right now, having Russia as an enemy is making you guys more left-leaning as a country. The far-right elements of Ukraine were predominantly like Russia-sympathetic Easterners. Kiev has always been more progressive than the Donbass. And over the past decade or so, Ukraine as a whole has moved left because you see what far-right politics looks like. It looks like Russia. You don't want that. And that's great.
Yeah.
And you guys might end up being the most left-leaning country in Europe by the...
That's not as simple as it seems, okay? Because Poland has suffered from Nazi invasion. Poland has suffered from the oppression of the USSR. Poland has suffered from the USSR invasion. Poland knows perfectly well how a far-right Nazi regime looks like, and yet Poland still managed to turn out far-right. So I am not so as convinced that Ukraine, through soft influence from their currently amazing allies, the Polish government, could not move rightwards during the peacetime as well. Right? I'm not as convinced. I wish that would be the case. I don't think the Euromaidan was a significant part in the stabilization of Ukraine. True, but I'm not as positive, right? That the trajectory will be as left-wing once the country comes down, right? Does that make sense? Like, keep in mind, after 1989, there was a certain real effort for Poland to move leftward as well. But that was sort of wasted, right? There was a strong left-wing movement in Poland after 1989, but that was basically very wasted as well. So it's not as simple and as straightforward as one may think it is, right?
The time this is all done, depending on what happens in the West. And I just worry about this like ultra valorized, like, hey, we defended you guys against Russia, so everything we do and say is in line with the Ukrainian national interest kind of nationalism that was...
I think
I
you
worry.
consider us I understand that, but I think you consider us a little bit more retarded than we are, which
No.
is
No. Listen,
understandable.
we're retarded. That's why. I wouldn't have thought this 5 years ago. The problem is we're retarded, and I know for a fact that you guys are the same species as us. That's my fucking issue.
True.
We're on the way down. We're sinking right now. I'm very worried. That's it. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think it's like a 51% chance or whatever. I just worry. I just worry a little.
Yeah, I worry a little bit as well. I'm not gonna lie. I worry a bit. Yeah, I do worry a bit about what happens after the war. I do worry about that a little bit. Yeah.
Which is, by the way, kind of funny when people talk about like Azov and shit all the time, which kind of bad that we ended up talking about it. It's not that big of an issue, to be honest,
It's
in
really
terms of
not.
it was
Yeah, I have to agree that people, like, my worries about what happens after the war are not really focused around the Azov battalion. It's about certain broader trends that might prove to be negative after the dust had settled, right? Does that make sense? A little bit more pessimistic and say that considering that Peace, the Law and Justice Party, has been trying to push a law that would change the way that votes would be counted, aka every single vote would be read out in front of a commission, including who the vote went to, and the commission would judge whether or not the vote is valid or not. So I think that unfortunately the current government is working its way towards a situation in which voting it out will not be an option anymore. Polish government is clearly trying to do away with democracy and just to stay in power indefinitely. Like, that is the thing. That is the big worry that I have about Poland. Poland's government is clearly moving to a situation in which voting out the bad government will not be an option anymore, right? Like, that's like, I've heard so many people in the past say, oh yeah, they'll just be voted out. Well, what if they, like, Kaczynski has stated, quite frankly, and I must admit that at times my my sort of brand animal becomes a very unlucky choice, but there we are. Here I am with my choice of duck as the symbol animal. Kaczynski has openly stated we're going to have a second Budapest in Poland. So he said, like, that he wants the government to move the way Hungary has moved, right? But it is always important to have that ray of optimism. Not that things will be perfect, but to avoid hopelessness. The second we give in to hopelessness is game over. Oh no, I'm never gonna give in to hopelessness. But I will also never give in to the attitude of thinking that things will work themselves out on their own. No, no. Things will not work themselves out on their own. We need to actively and purposely push for things to become better. We must avoid hopelessness at all costs, but we also must avoid complacency at all costs. We must not believe that just with time everything will sort itself out. We have to be active in pushing for what we want to see happen in the world. Organize. Like, we need to work together. Love and solidarity is not a thing that I have said today, but we basically need to push for love and solidarity, especially since this year is the year of love and solidarity, I have declared, right? So we must push for change. And like, when I say I worry about this or I worry about that, it's not to doomer post or to spread that it's all hopeless. It's for us to actively look for, like, to be very proactive, right? After the dust has settled, we, especially living in places like Poland, should come in contact with the progressive people from Ukraine and cooperate, right? Help each other out. This is what we need to do. Support each other, right? Okay, I'll see you, Timero. I love One Piece. It's up to us. If Levica is to be stronger, then it's up to us to make it stronger, Timero. Like, the left wing needs to become an international project, just as the right wing is an international project, right? We need to be in all of this together. Absolutely. I'm trying to get immediate family to understand how scary the horizon is. My mom has a liberal attitude, or just have hope and things will work out. Don't be so worried about things. Yeah, we need to turn the left wing into an international project. And part of that is like for people in Poland as progressives to support the refugees, to support Ukraine from the left-wing perspective, right? And after the war, to try to cooperate with left-wing movements in Ukraine, right? By the way, is there a stream schedule? I want to know when to tune in. I usually start streaming at about 9 p.m. Polish time. 9 p.m. Polish time I start streaming usually, right? Yeah. Thank you, Timero. I think it's really important for us. This year is the year of Daki Rusiaza. You know? I will do my best to do better things and, of course, to grow. And if it's possible, Timero, recommend me to other, if you know any Polish lefties, recommend my channel. I'm actually going to start doing more content to the Polish channel. I'll see you.
I am really sorry about your friend, and I don't mind you talking about this with me at all, by the way. I don't want you to think as though this is some,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's fine. Like I said, I would like to. I do appreciate everything you did, in terms of Ukraine, and I definitely don't think you're a bad person because you said.
Yeah.
I just think what you said was wrong, but that's fine. I think I can think that and still, appreciate and respect people who I disagree with and who I think did something bad. It's something people on the internet, especially in the West, should learn. I think this skill to be, cordial and to respect people who you deeply disagree with. To me, it's a bit different, of course, because these guys, despite the fact that they might not want me at their table, considering my beliefs and my opinions, but they in 2014 defended me from dying, and they continue to do it, which is something that earns them respect in my eyes, for sure.
Well,
and
hopefully years and years of conflict with the far right, Russian government, will push them away from the worst elements of their ideology.
Yes,
for those that
and
still
it did,
believe.
and it already did. Yeah, and a lot of them already did. I do believe people can change, by the way.
No, I do as well.
Yes, that's why I don't advocate for, shooting missiles in Belgrade somewhere in Russia. I do believe even brainwashed people as Russians are, and despite the grief they brought, unimaginable grief to this country, I still believe they potentially can, get away from this fascist vibe they're on right now. So yeah, so I do believe it, and if I believe that of them, I believe that of many other people as well. And I would, if you don't mind, please show this thing. I'm so pissed off that people was always saying that this is like Azov emblema, basically, like how to say it in English, like their symbol, basically.
Oh yeah.
And this is not a fucking Volksangel. I'm so tired of it. This is an N crossed by an I, national idea. It's another picture you have is how actually Volksangel looks, which is a Nazi, a wolf's hook Nazi.
Isn't this
shit.
Is this not a black sun?
No, it's not. and it pisses me off that you said it, but you know.
Does it? It sure.
People,
It sure
yeah,
looks like one. I mean,
it looks like it.
it
Bad idea to
sure.
use that for
It
sure.
sure looks like
Yeah,
a German Nordic rune in front of a black sun. You know, like the hypothetically.
yeah, but it's not.
Okay,
Yeah, but
it's
it's not.
legally distinct, copyright
Yeah,
distinct.
yep. So yeah, I mean, you can assume that they like were vibing with this shit and made it look like that, but it's an N crossed by an I. But again, you can say it's you know, the sea is Azov Sea, as you probably like maybe know. It's actually water, and the sun is for that. But it does look
No.
kind of like that. I give you that.
Kind of, sort of identical, I have to say. It looks, I don't know.
Bad PR for sure.
Slight resemblance,
Yeah.
I'd say, to the Nordic
But
rune of the
you,
black sun.
yeah, but you can see how in the picture, if you can see it, are these movements neo-Nazi? This picture I showed you, they show it that how actual Wolfsangel looks like. So how the wolf's hook looks like, and it actually looks way more like a Russian Z symbol. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's got a few associations, got a few connotations.
yeah, true.
I'm
Yeah, strange. But
well,
right.
we'll see how things pan out.
Yeah.
Again, the really though, like when you said it's not a big deal, I do genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
The
I know that.
because like the thing is here, like the Azov battalion is quite small relative to the total size of the Ukrainian military,
Thank
and the thing
goodness.
is that right now
Less than 1%.
the symbol of American fascism is literally like Christian nationalism. The symbols of which have been ubiquitized at almost every level of American society, which means that it's essentially just a larger dog whistle. I don't know. We all have to be careful about this stuff. This Nazi shit can really sneak up on you.
I will say that I will give you like something for sure is that people the Russians made this such a strong tool against Ukraine, calling us Nazis, you know? So this is like denazification.
Yeah,
the whole they allegedly, you know, invaded.
Yeah, that's really horrible. This is why, my goodness. For me, that's like a really bad part of it. Simplifying really complicated history of Ukraine to say that it's a Nazi country, and it becomes even worse when people start saying that if you claim that Holodomor was a genocide, then you must be a Nazi sympathizer. It becomes really bad, really dishonest. Like, I cannot state that enough. Horrible.
Or they're trying to save us or some shit, liberators. They're always the heroes, you know, these fascists in their story.
Yeah.
So basically what happened is it's such a, I guess such a...
Russia does like... Russia actually, part of the propaganda is that Russia is trying to be the liberator that saves Ukraine from its own Nazism, but also is trying to save Ukraine from the impending Polish invasion. Right? Definitely not her best take, but I do understand the impulse to completely reject the Azov Nazi narrative propaganda from Russia. Has it overblown, so it's super touchy. Like Russia has made Ukraine out to be like a Nazi state, and then they're the liberators. And of course, let's not forget the propaganda of Poland being only basically 1 day away from a full-scale invasion on Ukraine. Let's not forget about that one.
Reaction to many Ukrainians to that, I must say. So if you like talk shit about like Azov, talk shit about honestly anything, some people will like just have this knee-jerk reaction to it because they associate this rhetoric with Russian propaganda.
Yeah,
which I think is understandable but can be bad.
Russian propaganda is like really bad, like really bad. Russia is really aggressively pushing its propaganda. There are certain small fractions within Poland that spread the stop the Ukrainization of Poland rhetoric. Very small minority of people, and Russia jumped on it. Russia jumped on it and spread it in its media as if there was this big, huge Polish movement that is anti-Ukraine. Ridiculous. Russian propaganda is really something else. Trust.
You need to engage with that, I think. So I saw people trying to say that Beletsky is not a Nazi, actually, which is not true. He's, which I guess is what you're worrying about, to try to, I think what you mean is like that their like heroic acts in defending our country will allow them to, pass some of that Nazi shit. Like,
yeah, well, Nazi
slip it in.
Fascism is basically always initially framed as like a necessary defense of the nation, given form.
It is in this case, right?
Well,
unlike Russia.
I mean, I think you can defend against Russia without doing the Azov Nazi shit. But like,
definitely, yes.
There's nothing about the ideology of fascism that makes a country more able to defend itself. I just think that's a pretext given for like the rise of that ideology, because people get scared and they run to far-right ultranationalists. I think right now Ukraine is actually unique in being one of the rare examples where, in a time of actual existential threat, the country rallied around internationalism and liberal democracy,
yes,
rather than like
definitely.
An ultra-strongman. And that actually is unique, because usually it goes the other way.
Yeah, you wouldn't find a soldier. I talked to many of them, as you probably know, as a volunteer, So most of them, pretty much none of them will say they're fighting for Zelensky or some shit. It sounds like ridiculous to Ukrainians. You would never hear a person saying, yeah, I'm fighting for like my strong leader Zelensky.
No,
it just doesn't happen, which is, I think, good in a way, because people mostly will say, I fight to defend my home, I fight to defend my country, the people I love. They would not say that they're fighting for some like big political nobody. Also, many people who are fighting are not like ethnic Ukrainian. Nobody cares. So there's that. And overall, the rhetoric such as far right is very rare here right now, which I appreciate.
Right
We'll
now,
see how it goes, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope that pattern continues.
True.
Yeah,
And I hope it spreads to Poland while we're at it.
Understand like the concern, but understand mine as well, I guess. Yeah, that's probably it. Anyway, we ended up talking about Azov.
Yeah, well, we talked about Naruto as well.
Yes, but this is the only thing I disagree with you on, to be fair. So this is why I decided to, talk about it. And I wouldn't even talk about it, but just many Ukrainians wanted me to. And I don't know if I did a good job or not. But overall, this is, again, trying to point out that this is pretty much the only thing I didn't like that you said, like in the entirety of your coverage of Ukraine. Which,
his coverage is very
not
good.
Bad. not anywhere as bad as some other people who I will not name.
Hassan Piker.
Well,
then I'll strive to make it worse so that we have more to talk about.
I guess we said it at the same time.
About in the future.
Nah, don't do that.
Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it as well. I really do think you did fantastic. And actually joined me the faith and the leftists in Western. Because they fucked up, dude.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time. It's such an unbelievable fumbling of the ball. It's the biggest layup in the universe. The entire Western world is lined up to defend a country from a fascist invasion, and the left starts sweating and tweedling their fingers. It's genuinely
it's
repulsive.
So confusing. It's it's like the most on the nose imperialist invasion.
Exactly.
Like old school style, like
really.
that
I mean,
uncovered imperialist.
If it's old school style, it's because it's done by a country with a lot of experience in it.
Just without any attempts to cover what they're doing. They literally say they want to re-educate us and to destroy Ukrainian identity. They destroy our flags. They destroy our language. They say that our language is degenerate. They call,
even though Ukrainian is closer to the language of Kiev than Russian is. That's one thing. But yeah, that Ukraine was created by Lenin, ridiculous claim.
Ukrainian identity basically a disease at this point.
No, they've said that,
and
and the Western far right is saying that the Russia's invasion of Ukraine might be legitimate as a way of protecting them from, like, global liberalism, which is literally a Nazi conspiracy theory. The idea that, like, expansion
the Jews,
is necessary. Yeah, no, literally, completely, JQing it.
Yeah.
I should have got the guy who was a tanky, who told me that I was part of some transatlantic elites or some shit. And he was like, I was like, is he a Nazi? But he was like, no, I'm a glorious communist. And I was like, oh, are you sure about that, dude? Sounds suspicious to me. Yeah. And he was like, she has Azov tattoos. Like, it's a meme, basically. At this point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, they have a lot going on.
And I was like, oh, no, only like Spyro the Dragon, like Final Fantasy and flowers and shit, sorry. And he was like, oh, yeah, you have Azov tattoos, but they will not accept you because you have a long nose. So he basically assumed I was a Jew, but was condemned in my country for being anti-Semitic Nazi. While doing the stereotypes of Jews having long noses.
You would understand this if you had read Marx. All this fits within the greater theory. It all makes sense once you know.
Yeah, he said actually about theory. Shame that I did in fact read it. Nothing about long noses there. So, it's very, very confusing sometimes, for sure. But I do appreciate, like I said, the work you did, because boy, was it bad. Only like two leftists I like is you and Loner Box, who is awesome. I talked to him 2 times, I think. Really enjoyed talking with him.
We'll see how things go with regards to the war, Obviously, it's going to be a bit of a slowdown during winter because it's fucking cold over there. I hope you're doing okay.
I am, yeah.
When,
actually, today was the missile strikes. They almost ruined the conversation.
Yeah,
because, I woke up to the explosions.
Woke up to those messages from you. Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, I appreciate, by the way, you wishing me, like, not to, to blow up and shit.
Yeah, I hope you keep not doing that. That'd be great if you could keep not blowing up.
Basically, it was like 4 explosions, and I like went to the corridor and waited out, and the electricity went out for a bit, and I thought, fuck, I was about to have the conversation with Vaush, and now it's all fucked up because of Russians. They just don't want us to talk, apparently. But
I got the Russians to stop so we could have our convo.
We could have your debate.
Oh, was it you? Thank you.
I went back to Kharkiv.
It was actually as a Kharkiv kit finder. Yeah, and you found those missiles and you like intercepted them before they hit the infrastructure, I think.
The tourism continues.
I would. If only I had the power to.
The tourism continues.
If only we all did,
I hope.
Yeah, we would stop.
I hope you have a wonderful. Wait, what time is it over there?
Too late. It's like 0:18, so
Jesus.
It's like, I don't know, in your AM PM.
I hope you have a wonderful night. I really appreciate you coming on, and I enjoyed the conversation very much. Hopefully, when next we talk, I have not added to the list of grievances that you want to bring up with me.
Don't worry. It's not you. The tears is just emotional, My friend
I fully get it.
Probably is dead. Yeah, so it's not you, honestly. And I do wish we could talk about something more cheerful next time. Maybe like why Russians are fascist. Pretty cheerful. I think.
More Naruto.
Oh yeah, that's one too. Yeah. I think you appreciated the conversation. If you have me on again, then maybe we'll talk about something we more agree on.
Of course. Well, shout out your Twitter. Right?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I always forget it. Yeah. So basically, I have like a Twitter when you guys can donate stuff.
Yeah,
you can support me on PayPal. I have like a PayPal email address there, and you can see on Twitter the work I do to help our troops.
Actually, while we're at
it, with artillery brigades and Kharkiv primarily. No, because I'm from Kharkiv, And so I have. I think you can link it if you can. I can probably. Do you have it or something? Or
okay, we do. Wonderful.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you to like everyone who listened to this conversation.
There is a link.
If you are able to, please do help out. We are bringing them medical supplies, aid, vests, all sorts of stuff that they need. It's pretty fucking nasty right now in terms of weather, so they do need like thermal wear and stuff like that, which we do provide for them. And I do hope that you guys don't think I'm a fucking Nazi, which leftist seems to do. Yeah,
Azov
I was
militant Anna comes on stream to defend her Nazi regime, of course.
Yeah, people will say that 100%. I'm like, no, not going to bother with that even because
I think my community is
yeah,
very unconcerned with the presence of Nazis in Ukraine. It has been
which is
overstated to such a ridiculous degree by Russian disinfo. There are more Nazis in the American military, I feel.
Yeah.
It honestly might be the truth, yes. And also, I think that's props to you because of your coverage. I think they are well aware that this is a ridiculous point to make because you made it convincing arguments about that, and I appreciate that. That I do not get from your community all the Azov. Sorry, I just imagine.
I would like to have a conversation with Anastazja, right?
Yeah, yeah. Probably not. Probably not the best idea, but do appreciate your community because they have been pretty nice to me, surprisingly for the leftists. So
they'll keep it up too.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have a wonderful night and stay warm, please.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you a lot, and bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Hello. Well, that was nice. That was a fun conversation.
That was a fun debate.
A couple of quick addendums.
Right.
I'm sure some people in chat have very strong opinions on that convo. I could tell because a lot of you were being pretty insufferable. In both directions, interestingly enough. Anna's absolutely not a Nazi apologist. True. I do think that she's way less concerned here with both the prominence of the ideology within... I know about Tate. Give me a minute. Within the Azov battalion and with the potential for them to be hiding their power level. But that's like a very subjective thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Wait, hold on just a second.
I know what you mean, Vaush.
You guys are such fucking retards.
I will defeat Russia with my team. Thanks, after I'm done exercising this True.
So it's also obviously like a very heated topic for her, which is fine. That's fine. You know, we're humans. That's all right.
I'm a human. But I'm a duck, actually.
Can you clip this talk? Why would I not? Have you been on my channel? I'm finishing the thing now. Wait for the Tate. Just shh. Oh my god.
Anyway.
What was I getting at? Yeah. I do think that she's a lot less concerned with the prominence of the ideology and the risk of it being sort of normalized through ultranationalism. She kind of said it herself, right? She said, like, okay, well, they were the ones who defended me, but that's like how it starts, right? Like, that's how they legitimize themselves. Like, they're far right, but they were the ones who stood up and defended us. That's literally like the line, like every time, you know? I don't worry that much about like Azov taking over the country because again, like it's a very, very, very small, you know, I'm not that concerned. But like, yeah, I also don't know what was up with the logo insignia stuff at the end. I mean, even Wikipedia says that it's a Wolf's Angel and the Black Sun. They
like it's a bit more like complicated, right? Like the war is a bit more long term. I'm a cartoon.
This logo.
And also, right.
15 because it was Nazi, you know. Now it's this, which just has the very swastika-looking Wolf's Angel in like a lightning bolt angle. Anyway, still looks kind of sus. Yeah, it's the Azov battalion. I still fully believe that the Azov battalion is like heavily aligned with the Nazi politic, but again, like I don't know how you would even go about that. You would have to like it's not like there's a poll, you know. I don't know how you go about that. It's the impression I've gotten, I guess. They were a lot more openly Nazi back in 2014. Anna says that over the past decade they've softened up, which might be true. It's genuinely possible that a lot of the worst behavior of the Azov battalion is behind it, and that like back in 2014, 2015, they were like full-on Nazi, like neo-Nazi, like post-band, right, whatevers, and that since then they've sort of slowed down a bit. It's possible that they're hiding their power level. It's not really possible to know. The
Right.
broader conversation that we were having, though, which is one that Anna does have a point on, though it depends on the degree of like semantic specificity you want to lay on, is one about like essentialism, right?
Yep.
So, like, for example, if you're talking about like the Wehrmacht in World War II, and it's like, dude, a bunch of Wehrmacht died, yeah, because they lost the battle, you know, like. Hopefully this isn't a controversial position, but obviously if you...
The point that Carasso made as well, by the way, the essentialism, right? I don't know if it's international, but you're a bit quieter than Vaush. Intentional, but you're a bit quieter than Vaush, which makes sense, but it's hard for me anyway, but sure about others to pick up what you're saying over Vaush. Oh, okay. I might need to be a bit more loud, right?
zoom in on...
I need to be more loud.
A lot of them individually will be good
I think I've been pretty loud overall.
people. That's the case for any military, right? She didn't like the comparisons of the Wehrmacht, but I'm just using the Wehrmacht here because the Wehrmacht are like the most Nazi military because it was the military of the Nazis. Like if you zoom in on any group, same with like the Taliban, right? Like if the U.S. invades Iraq, wait, we actually did that. That's crazy.
Come on, Astra, come
like,
on.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't give a fuck if like Saddam Hussein and his soldiers die, because let's be clear, Saddam Hussein was a monster, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't care if like U.S. soldiers die. No, if you zoom in far enough, you're always going to see good people. No matter what the
Vaush
group
is loud in real
I
life.
talk about like I don't really care if Russians die as they invade Ukraine.
quiet
Even though I know a lot
there.
of those Russians are like scared, like terrified, brainwashed 18-year-old conscripts who like deserve better, you know. I just want to be clear, like I have made broad statements about not really caring if people who want me dead ideologically die, because again, like, if you're a Nazi, ideologically you want me dead. Nazism and murder of all the queers, that's like a one-to-one thing. There's really not much leeway there.
And
And what's more, it's not even like a passive affirmation of existing values. It's a reassertion of reactionary values.
yeah.
So, for example, there are probably a lot of people in like some parts of Africa who want all gay people dead, but that's because they've adopted the dominant culture of the area that they live in, because they live in a very reactionary area. But to be a Nazi in like Ukraine means you had to have been surrounded by every opportunity to not be a Nazi and then still became one. You know what I mean? It's not just I am in this time period and I am reactionary. It's I am observing progressivism and choosing to reject it. Which you know, which is probably not a good thing to do.
True.
But anyway, you know, yeah, I can't care that much about the death of a person who ideologically wants me dead.
All right.
But at the same time, like every Nazi hypothetically can be converted, right? Isn't that also the case in America? Well, there are American Nazis, yeah. Every Nazi can be converted, like hypothetically, right? Not in
I am
practice,
the Vaush.
no, not everyone can.
I am the Vaush. Away from the mic. I am secretly Vaush. Have you ever seen Vaush and me in one room? No.
But anyone can.
No.
There's always a chance. So
You haven't.
I do think it's important to adopt the kind of anti-essentialist perspective on the
True.
whole thing, you know, because the essentialism will get you in trouble in the long run, if that
It
makes
will.
sense. Like,
And we
saw-
have made that point. Essentially, we have essentially made that point earlier in this video, in this segment, when we have discussed this with Carasso, right?
saw this with Westerners who were saying that Russian refugees shouldn't be allowed into Estonia. Do you remember?
True.
Like, Russian refugees were trying to pour into Estonia to escape
Not just to Estonia, to Poland as well. I will just add it, right? Not just to Estonia, to more countries.
the general conscription, and Westerners were like, no, you stay back there. And like, their first level ideology there is support Ukraine, fuck Russia, which is good, but they don't do it in a nuanced way. They do it in an essentialist way, where it's like, okay, well, if Russia's the bad guy in this conflict, that means the Russian refugees are part of the bad team, and you
Not
know,
good.
that we shouldn't be nice to them or whatever. You're seeing like
Russian refugees should be accepted. Like 100, like, it's not just Estonia that refused Russian refugees. It's not by a long shot. Poland was among those countries.
Like a failure in the analysis because they're not willing to regard. This is one of the reasons why, like, theoretically lefties should have the best foreign policy, even though we fucking don't. It's because, like, class analysis is critical to understanding the difference between what the Russian people want and what the Russian elite, like, convince them is good for them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a
100%,
like a multi-tiered structure of coerced consent that like really influences the way this stuff pans out. Anyway, I wanted to go over all this just because I think it's a conversation worth having.
Right.
You know, obviously, I feel like Anna's concern was that the Azov battalion group is still ultimately like serving on the right side, which they are if it's just a Ukraine versus Russia thing.
Yeah.
But from my perspective,
I think I've explained this as well during this segment.
it's more of a right-wing ideology versus left-wing ideology thing, in which the far-right people in Azov battalion are incidentally on the right side of the conflict, but ideologically in line with the systems that caused the conflict to begin with.
And might cause some harm further along the way, right?
But then again, not every single person in the Azov battalion is themselves a Nazi.
Right.
So, you know, yeah, but, you know, I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from and where she was coming from. Because, again, I don't think what she did was Nazi apologism. You know, I don't think that's the...
I don't think so
that's
either.
the narrative at all. Okay. Are we good? Are we good?
I think Anastasia is fundamentally a giggler, you know? Come on! If you've enjoyed this segment, then please, by all means, subscribe, leave a comment, and most of all, become a Patreon. I will link my Patreon. Please become a Patreon because it allows me to function like a human being. Okay? Come on! Boom, 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 giggler. Boom, boom, boom. Patreon. Boom. Here, I click on you. Patreon. So remember to subscribe, like, comment, giggle, become a Patreon, and maybe even like join the Discord, become one of the gigglers, and I will like see you when the giggling comes, the giggling shows, okay? Boom, I guess we're done.